Good evening, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this little topic that I thought was very particularly interesting, and I thought that I would talk about this one last time to kind of get my clear point across overall about this video, to talk about certain narratives that I have heard about, and kind of just to talk about something a little bit interesting, in my opinion. And in this video, we're going to be talking about the possibility of there being a Saul Canelo Alvarez versus Jermall Charlo fight. Of course, in many recent reports, there's been a possibility that maybe this fight will happen. But of course, there's also been recent news that maybe Canelo Alvarez, that he also may take his business elsewhere and fight maybe a Dimitri Bivol at light heavyweight, of course, for the WBA light heavyweight title, I believe. And then, of course, face Gennady Triple G Golovkin maybe in a possible trilogy. That's if Gennady Triple G Golovkin is able to get past Ryoto Murata, which I do more than likely predict that he'll be able to. But we'll see, all in all, what happens. But what I really wanted to talk about in this video, once again, was the situation of Mr. Jermall Charlo. Now, of course, recently in recent news, Jermall Charlo was arrested not too long ago and held in police custody. I believe that at the current moment in time that he somewhat seems to be doing okay. And I do overall hope that everything seems to be going okay with him. I hope that whatever is going on with him, that he gets over. Like I said, I don't like to wish negative things upon anybody. But I do have to question what has necessarily been going on for the last year to why Jermall Charlo seems to overall be putting himself in more troubling situations more often than usual. Now, maybe I just don't know Jermall Charlo enough personally. Maybe I don't know a lot of the times what he's done behind the scenes. Both Charlo brothers, to me, pop off as people that are very highly emotional. They seem highly reactionary, and sometimes it may seem overall like they may do rash decisions. And also in my video, when it came down to it, I did talk about the narrative because I've seen certain people talk about this. And I also kind of, I don't want to say I co-signed the idea, but I did mention that maybe it was a slight possibility. And let me overall explain my point. You know, it seems preposterous on the surface to bring this up. It may even seem pretty much 100% stupid to a lot of you overall that may be watching this video. Maybe for those of you that have been around my channel for a while, or maybe for some of you that may be new. And of course, it seems quite ridiculous to allege that the reason why Jermall Charlo got arrested is because he was avoiding that of a Canelo Alvarez, yada, yada, yada. What I'm going to say is this. I don't 100% necessarily think that that is what's going on here. I think that more than likely that Jermall Charlo is probably just caught up in a situation that he probably had with a personal family member. But what I will say is this. Sometimes when certain fighters, or sometimes when certain people, no matter what it be, when they sometimes have a lot of pressure on themselves, and maybe they see the inevitable death of something, whether it be a relationship or whether it be a career, they start acting a little bit differently. Or maybe it'll be even the taking of a life, or maybe the death of one's life. You know, let me explain. Say, for example, if someone has stage 4 cancer or someone of a sort, you start to notice that that person, because basically almost every day from then they're on, is more than likely going to be looked at as one of their final days, and they start acting differently. You know, they usually act either very, very nice, or they try to act at peace, or, you know, they act a little bit more rash when it comes down to, you know, they act maybe like they wouldn't have before. They don't act as calm. You know, they may, do some rash decisions. Basically, what is my point here? You know, when certain fighters, when it comes down to it, when they see maybe the possible inevitable death of their possible career, or someone that they believe is a very, very big threat, or when they have a big amount of pressure on their shoulders, sometimes it doesn't overall just take over their career. Sometimes it also takes over their life. And a lot of people, they may think that I'm going a little bit too far with this, but I'm going to bring up some prime examples overall in this video, and we're going to talk about it. Now, once again, do I believe that Jermall Charlo is having these problems because maybe all in all that, you know, he believes that there's a lot of pressure on his shoulders and maybe that he's going to have to take a big fight within the next couple of years? It could be that, but what I'll say is this. I think that there's a slight possibility of that happening. I think more than likely that Mr. Jermall Charlo probably just got himself caught up in a couple of maybe over-emotional or bad situations. At least I hope overall personally that's what it is. But let me say this. Have there been certain fighters, or are there certain fighters at the moment, in my opinion, that have gotten in trouble with the law, maybe because subconsciously they knew that there was someone out there, or they thought that maybe their career was eventually coming to an end and that it was inevitable that eventually their career death was going to come? Yes, I do. And a certain amount of people who don't understand what I mean, let me explain. Let me bring up Conor McGregor for an example. Conor McGregor used to be on top of the sport for the MMA world. He used to be the top star for that of the UFC. He used to debatably at one point in time be the number one pound for pound fighter. But once Conor McGregor, once he fought Floyd Mayweather Jr., and after that had happened, Khabib Nurmagomedov had kind of taken over his spot, especially at the lightweight division, especially within those lighter weight classes. And I think once Conor McGregor seen that Khabib Nurmagomedov and seen overall the type of style that he had and overall seen basically what all he was about, I think that Conor McGregor realized that, you know what, I don't know if I'm going to beat this dude. Now, some of you may ask overall, okay, well, what did Conor McGregor do to really prove to you that he knew men, eventually that his inevitable career death was going to come, or that all in all that he was not ever going to be the same after he fought Khabib Nurmagomedov? Well, just take a look at some of his actions. Not only overall did he attack Khabib Nurmagomedov on a bus with a dolly, I believe when it came down to it, or whatever it was called, and broke the glass and got certain shattered glass in certain people's eyes and, basically cut certain people on the bus. He basically got somewhat of criminal charges for that. But there was also certain other things that happened as well. Not only that, but Conor McGregor's trash talk for the Khabib Nurmagomedov fight, it basically was up on another level compared to any other fight that I had seen him, trash talk. Now, of course, Conor McGregor, he's always been a trash talker, but you can tell overall when someone, they feel differently about a certain fighter or they feel differently about a certain competitor. Because either A, they're very, very nice, or all in all, they're completely out of character nice, because all in all, they know that they're about to get their ass whooped and they don't want to get made fun of a whole lot, so they want to be looked at as humble. Or B, they'll trash talk to the point to where almost it's ridiculous, or to the point to where it goes a little bit too far. And that's exactly where Conor McGregor went. Why do I think he went there? Because I think he realized that if I don't try to get in this dude Khabib Nurmagomedov's head, if I don't try to get in his head, if I don't try to get my words overall in his skull, I think that this dude is going to run right through me. And I think that Conor McGregor, as soon as you've seen him in the first part of that fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov, I think that you can tell if you're a person that someone understands. And I'm not claiming to be, someone who's just a super duper genius, but I do overall know when a person is scared of a fight. Because not only have I looked overall at my own patterns overall, in certain competitive matches that I've had in the past, but I've also seen it many, many times with other people. You can tell when a fighter knows that they're going to lose. And when Conor McGregor was in that Khabib Nurmagomedov fight, even once that bell rang, with the laughing overall that he was having and the type of cockiness and the energy that he would have later on, he knew that Khabib Nurmagomedov was going to tear him a new ass. It just is what it is. Do I think the same thing is going on with Jermall Charlo? I'm not going to quite allege that as of yet. I don't think that there's anywhere near enough evidence to allege that. I think that more than likely Jermall Charlo probably just got caught up in overall, like I said, some over emotional reactions or stuff like that, because both the Charlo brothers, they do come across to me as people that maybe all in all in certain times may act before they think at certain times. But like I said, certain fighters or certain athletes, they may start to react differently when it comes down to once they see that maybe their career is finally going to come to an end, or all they may make a decision that may seem really, really rash. What do I mean by that? When it came to Keith Thurman against Errol Spence Jr., all of a sudden, he said that, I can't fight Errol Spence Jr. I keep having injuries. I keep having this. I keep having that. The reason why that is because Keith Thurman was basically trying to prolong that ass whooping or avoid Errol Spence Jr. as long as he could. Now he's calling for both of those fights against Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence because basically he has to, because he has no belts. But Keith Thurman overall did not want to face Errol Spence Jr. because he did not want to lose his zero. Mikey Garcia, when he fought Vasily Lomachenko, and he saw Vasily Lomachenko basically as the fighter that was going to deliver him inevitable death to his career when it came down to it, basically what he did is that he moved up to 147 against the fighter in Errol Spence Jr., where he basically had no chance whatsoever, and he tried to fight him, and he got his ass whooped. And it was the same thing that Kell Brook did with Gennady Triple G Golovkin. So my point being is this: a certain amount of people, they take a look at these things, and maybe they don't necessarily always know how to read them. Sometimes certain people react differently. And when you see a person all of a sudden start to act a little bit differently, not only all in all just in terms of their fighting career, but also in terms of life, that means that they recognize that their career is more than likely going to be over very, very soon. And more than likely it's going to be because of a fighter that they believe may end their career. Now, do I think that the same thing all in all is happening with Jermall Charlo? I'm not going to allege that as of yet, because I think Jermall Charlo is interested in the Canelo Alvarez fight. But who knows? We'll see what happens. I do have to question, however, why have you been arrested now 2 times, 2 separate times within the past year when I've never seen you like this before? Could it maybe be that some of the pressure is getting to Jermall Charlo, not only because maybe he has to face Canelo Alvarez, but people are also calling you to maybe face Demetrius Bubu Andrade and David Benavidez, and now you have more options available than ever, and the amount of pressure on your shoulders is more than ever? It could be. Who the hell knows? Another example that I would like to bring up overall is Mr. John Jones. And I can tell the way that John Jones, the way that he talks about Francis Ngannou and the demands that he is making, he basically is pricing himself out so he does not have to face Francis Ngannou. It is what it is. Every time I hear John Jones talk about Francis Ngannou, it looks like the man overall shits his pants a little bit and he has to change his underwear about 5 minutes later. It just is what it is. Like I said, I can tell when a fighter is scared of another fighter. And when it comes down to it, do I think that the same thing is going on with Jermall Charlo? I'm not going to allege that the exact same thing is going on with Jermall Charlo, but what I will say is this. We'll see all in all what ends up happening with his career within the next couple of years. Because Jermall Charlo, when it comes down to it, he's going to have to either put up or shut up within these next couple of years. And if he doesn't end up getting that Canelo Alvarez fight, he will eventually have to face either a David Benavidez or Demetrius Bubu Andrade, or the amount of pressure that is going to be against him from the fan bases and overall from the media. It is going to be it's going to be very, very big. Let me just say that. It's going to be insurmountable overall, if I'm saying the word right, when it comes down to it. It's overall going to not compare to any other type of pressure that Jermall Charlo has ever had on himself within his career. So it's going to be very, very interesting. And a certain amount of people, like I said, they may say, oh, well, he wouldn't get arrested all in all because, of this, and that. What I'll say is this, once again, when certain fighters or when certain athletes, when they see something on the law, especially fighters, because there's no bigger, there's no bigger embarrassment, there's no bigger humiliation than getting your ass kicked in the ring. When they sometimes see the inevitable death of their career, sometimes they start to act out really rash. It just is what it is. They move up a couple weight classes because they'd rather get their ass whooped and have an excuse to why they lost versus why they lost to maybe someone of their own weight class like a Kell Brook or Mikey Garcia. They may get in trouble with the law like a Conor McGregor or a John Jones, or they might do something like a Mike Tyson and look for a way out, when it came to the Evander Holyfield rematch, like when he bit his ear, looking for a way out, trying to avoid that ass whooping. It just is what it is. Sometimes when athletes, when they see all in all that something may come to an end or that basically they have no other routes and that, they probably are going to have to face this guy when it comes down to it, and they think that they may lose, all of a sudden they start to act out even worse than what they did before. Could that maybe be the situation with Jermall Charlo? I'm not going to say that quite as of yet. I don't think that there's anywhere near enough evidence for that yet, but we'll figure it out in time. It'll be very, very interesting. Personally, at the current moment in time, I just think that more than likely that Jermall Charlo probably had a couple of emotional reactions, but we'll see all in all what happens. Jermall Charlo is going to have a lot of pressure on himself within these next couple of years, and we'll see all in all what happens. And a lot of people, they end up getting in trouble with the law or they end up overall tearing their lives apart because they realize that basically that will give them an excuse to look themselves in the mirror many years later and say, you know what, the reason why I lost to that guy is because I was in shambles, because I wasn't mentally focused, or I wasn't this, I wasn't that. For those of you that know John Jones, for example, you guys should take a look at this video. But John Jones said something that was very revelatory about himself. And what John Jones basically said is that, you know what, a lot of the times before my big fights, I would get completely hammered, I would get completely wasted, and I would go to the party, and all in all, I would drink a bunch of alcohol, and I would get completely wasted, I would get completely hammered a week before the fight. So if I actually ended up losing a fight, I would basically have that excuse, and I would look myself in the mirror and say, the only reason why that person won that fight is because I overall did not take the fight fully seriously. There's some people overall that are just like that. There's some people that are like that. They overall do not have the courage to completely put things at 100% sometimes when it comes down to it, or they would rather have an excuse overall or a built-in excuse that they, somewhat subconsciously, knowingly put there when it comes down to it, just so they can look at themselves in the mirror many years later and say, you know what, this is the reason why I lost the fight. I lost the fight because my career was in shambles. I lost the fight because I was too much of a partier. I lost the fight because I was never the same. For Mikey Garcia's example, I was never the same once I went overall to Errol Spence Jr., and then I lost to Lomachenko. I was never the same after that. I was never the same after any of these things. So like I said, there's a certain amount of people that may take a look at me and they may say, well, for you alleging, that's not too smart, or, all in all, when it comes down to that's a little bit extreme. I'm not necessarily alleging that Charlo is avoiding Canelo. I don't think that that's necessarily what's going on here. But what I will say is this: we'll tell within time. What I'll say is that we'll tell within time if overall this is just a couple of, unfortunate emotional reactions, or is the pressure actually getting to Jermall Charlo more than what we even originally thought? Because I've seen this with a multitude of fighters. It's not just certain boxers that I've seen it with. I've also seen it with certain MMA fighters. I've also seen it with certain other athletes as well. And it's not even just with this. If you've ever been in a relationship, if you've ever been a part of a breakup, once both sides kind of start realizing that maybe all in all that breakup is eventually going to come, all of a sudden the fights start more often. All of a sudden they start saying things that they originally actually always thought about each other that always bothered, them about them. It just is what it is. All of a sudden, the smart ass comments, start going way high. All of a sudden, they end up saying, mean things to each other because they can tell that the relationship is slowly dying when it comes down to it. Or certain people that don't want to be in a relationship anymore, they may overall start to, instead of breaking off, instead of, making themselves feel guilty, they may all in all make excuses or treat the other person horribly when it comes down to it, or may not, they may start fights all the time when it comes down to it, just so overall they can make an excuse to break off the relationship. So it is what it is. I kind of see it as, as a similar thing here, but I don't know. At the end of the day, like I said, in my opinion, Jermall Charlo more than likely just had a couple of emotional reactions, but it's going to be very telling to see what happens in the next couple of years with Jermall Charlo's career. It's going to be very interesting. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.